This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Welcome to Killer Innovations. I'm your host, Phil McKinney. Welcome to the studio. It's been a while since we've actually shot a video here in the studio. Yes, that is a real view of the mountains off my ranch here in northern Colorado. That is Long's Peak. It actually sits inside of Rocky Mountain National Park. So I guess I'm not one that can complain, given I do have a great view going through the whole shelter-in-place experience that we're all dealing with. But we have upgraded the studio. We have plenty of time on our hands. So we will be using the studio more often now for the going forward shows, giving you also a little bit of a video option to see what's it like as we put together the show. So today's show, we do have a guest joining us via Zoom. As you know, now we're more than 5 years where Zoom has been a great sponsor. Eric Ewing, who's the founder at Zoom, is a longtime friend, even when I was at HP and he was at Cisco. And we've had this great partnership where Zoom has been supporting the show to allow you to enjoy it. Allows us to have a small staff that helps us do the production work on this. So we thank Zoom, as always, for their support. We do have a guest joining us via Zoom today. It's a little bit of a different topic. We tend to get into more broad innovations, ideas, and entrepreneurs and business models, etc. This is kind of a mix because we're going to get into some technologies that I'm going to guess most of you don't think about or haven't thought about. You may enjoy looking at them, but you actually haven't thought about some of the technical challenges and the innovation challenges to make things that you have enjoyed a reality. And so today's guest, joining me here via Zoom, is William Benner. William is the president and CTO for Pangolin. Now, he and I spent some time before we started the show today talking about a little bit of the background on this. But before we jump into the specifics of the technology, Bill, I wanted you to give us a little bit of background on yourself. How did what's your background and how did you get into this particular topic of interest?
Oh, sure. Well, my father actually worked at UNIVAC and also at NASA on the Apollo space program, and he was one of the engineers there. And so I was always around that and kind of tagging around him. And so that got me interested in electronics. And so I attended an electronics part in high school at kind of one of their programs there, and wound up representing that high school in the International Skill Olympics and played sixth for that, and then went on to college to study the field of electronics. So now electronics wasn't my whole life. I was also in a rock band, like many people out there. I found lots of tech people are in rock bands, and you figure you play guitar, that's how you get the girls, right? That's what you're thinking. Never works, but that's what we think. So so I played bass and synthesizer, which might even be worse from a girl's perspective. But yeah, so while I was in a rock band, for us, it wasn't only about the music, but it was also about the look, kind of the how flashy could we make this? Because we figured that kind of the flashier it was, the more excited people would be, and they kind of confused that for good music. So I built my own lighting rig while I was in college, did that as a college project, and also so at the time, this was in the mid 80s, and Pink Floyd and Blue Oyster Cult had lasers as part of their rock band. And so I said, well, we need that for us. But I looked into it, and lasers were just crazy expensive. And so just kind of looked at it, still talking about a college kid's budget, right? So, so I looked around, and I was able to find a place that sold these surplus lasers. I found lasers were used in a particular type of development machine that Kodak used for film developing. And so I was able to take that plus some other things and just kind of cobbled this thing together, and was able to create a laser show for our band. And that got a lot of interest. It got a lot of views. And what happened was the band, like what happens with many high school and college bands, the band kind of faded away into the background. We had the drummer who moved up to Jacksonville. We had the guitarist who moved away. But my interest and love of lasers remained. And so I figured, let's see if we could turn this into a business.
Well, it's interesting because, from this standpoint, it's almost you fell into this by accident.
Yeah, in a way, yes. I wanted to create something for our band, and then that served as a direction. And the kind of the primary thing at the time, the band fell away, but the direction of lasers did turn out to be a good direction for the rest of my life.
Yeah, and so in effect, the laser show that you created for your band then became the foundation for what it is your company does now, right? Because that's basically what you're doing is, and I'm gonna take the wild guess that the laser show you do now is a little more sophisticated than the laser show you did in college.
Far more. Yes, yes.
Well,
Yeah,
I think
we've been in business for 34 years, and it's just been a crazy ride.
well, and I think that was my point in the intro for today's show was we've all seen different kinds of laser shows and as I was sharing with you before we started the show today, my son works for the Walt Disney Company in Orlando. He's been with them for more than 11, 12 years now, and he's always been on the theme parks and resort side. So it's about park expansions and the new water show and the new laser shows and all that. It's all about how do you create that wow experience. And so that was kind of the point to the intro was we probably have all seen laser shows, but we probably have almost like zero background into how all that comes together. And
how it works, right? Exactly. Disney is one of our clients, actually.
Oh, great! Yeah, well, that and I had read that in the background, sheet on you and your firm, and I'd assumed that you had some involvement because I'm going to guess there aren't a lot of people in this space. This would classify as kind of somewhat of a niche area for a lot of businesses.
Yeah, for sure. It's a big niche. And we're not the only ones. There's a half a dozen companies scattered around the world. I think we're the only ones in the United States that, and I want to be clear that we don't do the laser shows, but what we do is we make the equipment that other people do to do the laser shows.
Right.
These are primarily production companies. It could be your theme parks and, individuals. Even your local pubs and clubs have our laser systems in them as a part of the wow factor there.
So, in fact, you're actually then providing the enabling technology. Others are crafting and choreographing the show, but you're that enabler for them to be able to do that then.
Yes, that's correct. It's the way I liken it is like imagine Microsoft, who makes Microsoft Word. They don't make medical transcriptions. They don't make legal documents. They don't make kids' term papers. But Microsoft Word is used for all of these things. So we make software and laser projectors that are used for laser shows all over the world, whether it's for concerts or theme parks or sporting events or with projection on the side of the mountain or on the side of the pyramids. That's all of our stuff that does that technology.
And how big is your company? Because you said you've been around for 34 years, you said?
Yes, that's right. Since 1986. And we've got a total of 35 people. We got 20 here in the Orlando area, and then people scattered around the world who work for us either as consultants. And we've actually got a couple little sister companies. We've got one in Slovenia. We've got a small company in China. And we're one of the only companies selling things to the Chinese, it seems. We make both hardware and software that we wind up selling to the Chinese. So that's been quite fantastic.
Well, I think that brings up an interesting point. So do you do your manufacturing in the United States then, or are you doing offshore?
Yeah, so all of the software is made in the United States. One of the things that we manufacture as a part of our systems are the laser scanners. And we'll talk about that probably in a little bit. But yeah, we manufacture the laser scanners here in the United States 100%. All the software is made here, some of the electronics, but in most of our circuit boards and that sort of thing is done by our sister company called Pangolin DOO in Slovenia.
Okay.
It's a great group of people there.
Oh, great. Interesting. Well, when I was at HP, you tend to find these pockets of unique expertise that you just never knew existed, like software engineering in the south of Brazil. You'd never think about it, but there's some college campuses down there that do phenomenal training for software. So you always find these little pockets. So Slovenia, I had a lot of good experience in Czechoslovakia in my background.
Yeah.
So, well, that's interesting from the standpoint of being able to leverage that expertise to create again these kinds of enabling technologies. We're coming up on a commercial break here real quick, but when we come back, what I want to talk about then is really about, you know, how did you get from that rock band to where your products are today? You know, what were some of those key milestones along the way? And talk a little bit about what some of your customers have done with your solutions. Because like you said, you're kind of like Microsoft Word, right? You didn't write the term paper, but boy, there have been some really great term papers written on Microsoft Word, or authors writing books
And
using
books,
your
yes.
tools, those kinds of things. So
Right.
when we come back, I want to pick up that part of the conversation. So don't go anywhere. We're going to be right back after this quick, short commercial break. Don't go anywhere. We're listening to Killer Innovations on the Biz Talk Radio Network. Welcome back to Killer Innovations. We're continuing our conversation with William Benner. William, as we were going to commercial break, we talked a little bit about, you know, high level, some of the companies that you have done work for. Who uses your laser system? So how does the process work of who are your customers and what do they do with it?
Sure, sure. Well, the customers are a lot of theme parks like Disney World and Universal Studios, your sporting events and organizations like the NFL, the NBA, the NHL, even the Super Bowl halftime show, your major tours and concerts like Lady Gaga, Trans-Siberian Orchestra, Justin Timberlake, corporate events like Hilton Hotels, Marriott, BMW. And usually how they become our customer kind of indirectly is a production company gets contracted out by various touring organizations or the NBA or that sort of thing. So they're not really our direct customer. In the case of Disney and Universal Studios, they are, because they have kind of their in-house production staff.
Right.
But it's mostly production people, artists, lighting designers, visionaries who know what they want to create in terms of the wow factor, and they just need the equipment to help them to do that. And sometimes some assistance from us in implementing their vision.
Yeah, in fact, it's been, I've got a little bit of a background because I designed, you know, years ago. My original major was architecture, but I got asked to design a new exhibit for the museum in Washington, D.C. called the New Media Gallery. And we used laser systems there to do wall projection kinds of interesting, you know, kind of visual wows kind of a thing. And, you know, and again, we hired a production company to come in. We just said, here's what we wanted to do. You figure out all the underlying components to make it happen. And that sounds like kind of what your customers, in many cases, come to you for. They may have the vision, but they need the componentry to pull it all together.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, and sometimes it leads to other things, you know, like we have a company who's looking for laser to do something, and they really can't find online, you know, just through Google searches and that sort of thing. They really can't find what they're looking for. So they wind up contacting us and saying, hey, you know, we've got this idea of putting laser projectors on a train. And this train goes around this gigantic warehouse, and we need to coordinate our people. So can we make it so that when the train stops, it projects instructions on the floor? And we've done some logistics, and we believe that this will help to make our people more productive. It'll save 3 seconds per train stop. And when you amortize these 3 seconds over the thing, it saves the company $100,000 a year or something like that. So just different things. It all leads to something, you know, and we've had product discussions like this, which lead to other things. And that's really, you know, when you talk about your podcast, your innovation, that's really what I think would be interesting, right, and kind of an interesting discussion to have, is how it is that a discussion leads to a completely separate innovation, a completely separate side product. Because we have, through these discussions with customers and completely prospective discussions, started 2 complete other divisions of my company. One division dedicated to semiconductors and one division dedicated to laser scanners, just out of a discussion that starts with a kind of a laser show type thing, you know, so it can lead to somewhere else.
Yeah, well, this is interesting because, you know, as I've shared many times on the show, typically customers may not be the best source for innovations, right? If people are going out with, you know, they go out with the proverbial blank sheet of paper and say, you know, so what are your ideas, right? because in many cases, customers don't know what's possible. But in
Right.
your case, do you find that a lot of your ideas do come from customers where they say, I see what you do, I see what my need is, could you marry these together? Or is it a case of you're already into lasers, but could you create a laser that does something else? Is that do you find that becomes the primary source for these new ideas? Is customers coming with problems, or are you going out there and helping them identify the problem and giving them a solution? Or is it maybe both?
It is both, but I'd say primarily it's the customers who come to us and they say, "Hey, we know that you do this. We found on your website you do this one thing. Can you
Hmm.
adapt what you do to what we do?" Some of our technology is actually embedded in 3D printers and in self-driving cars, and it is through these kind of discussions that, "Hey, we found on the internet we can't find anybody who does exactly what we want, but we found you." Can you adapt your technology to work with our systems? And so a lot of ideas and innovations do come that way.
So what's the criteria? Because I mean, my guess is you also get ideas that just aren't even on the ball field for you for saying that we're interested. Or do you just take a hard whack at everything, or is there some criteria you use to say, wow, that's interesting, and let's investigate that?
Yeah, probably the criteria is how close it is to what we already do. And in order to get it from where we are right now to where the customer needs it to be, how much investment is it going to take on our part in both time and money? Of course, time's the most valuable thing.
Right.
And then of the amount of time and money that it will take to get there, does the customer have the budget to support that? They're not only buying an end product from us, but they are going to need to be an investor in what we call NRE, the non-recoverable engineering costs of adapting our system to do what they want.
So in the case, do you also take a look at potentially partnering with customers? So if you got one customer with a problem and they fund the NRE, is there any form of a partnering if you think that there's more than one customer for that solution?
Oh,
Or
sure,
okay,
absolutely, yeah, definitely. Any kind of partnerships, we're really open. We're a small company,
right.
and so we're a furry little adaptable creature, and we go anywhere we need to go to help, to help bring these technologies to other markets and other benefits.
Yeah, and I think I think one of the things that a lot of innovators run the risk of is they become so enamored with their initial idea that any other request or interest that they think is a distraction, they immediately ignore, versus being open to customers having maybe a unique use case that you didn't consider that could lead into new market opportunities or new potential partners that opens up downstream a whole set of revenue and customer bases that you couldn't tap before. So your case, it's a great example of just being open to and listening to those ideas. We're getting ready to take another quick commercial break. When we come back, the topic I'd like to tee off on is I'm guessing you've seen some pretty wacky proposals, right? Lasers. The magic of lasers. Can you do X? So when we come back, what I want to talk about is what are the what's some of the wackiest proposals that you have ever seen come across your desk, and which ones did you actually go after and try to solve? So when we come back, we'll pick up that topic. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to Killer Innovations on the BizTalk Radio Network. Welcome back to Killer Innovations. We are continuing our conversation with William Benner. William, as we were going into commercial break, one of the thing that I kind of teed up is I want to hear about some of the wacky proposals. I mean, I've seen laser projectors, laser shows, from tops of buildings to integrated with the water show at Epcot to things in Las Vegas. I'm guessing you probably have been the guy that has seen some of the craziest, things like could you do? And what are some of those, and which ones did you actually go off and then make a reality?
Sure, sure. Well, I tell you what, one of my peers was approached by the chief marketing officer of Coca-Cola, who said, "I'll give you $1 million if you could put the Coca-Cola logo on the moon." And my peer just completely dismissed it out of hand, like, "Oh, this is just impossible." But actually, we looked into it and we found that it is possible, but it would take more than $1 million worth of equipment to do it. But then, and so that was many years ago. It was maybe 20 years ago that that happened. But then, what's interesting is in March of 2018, Rolling Rock, the beer company,
Yeah.
put out this kind of thing that we're going to be doing what they called moonvertising, and we've come up with this technologies, a proprietary technology to put the Rolling Rock logo on the moon, and watch for it in early April. Of course, what follows mid March is April Fools, and so it was all just an elaborate April Fools hoax. But it was, yeah. So people have thought of kind of putting projecting lasers on the moon and putting advertising on the moon. And I think by the time we're advertising and we're doing advertisements on celestial body, that will signal the end of humanity in some way. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I
So,
think if you it's kind of hard to hide from that advertisement. You
oh,
just
sure.
you can't easily run away from it. So, what are some other examples?
Yeah. So, some companies have come up with the idea of kind of like a laser beacon. We call them sky lasers, like putting a giant laser on the top of a hotel or a skyscraper in one form or another. This was recently done in Hollywood, Florida. There was a Hard Rock Hotel. It's the newest one. It's in the shape of a guitar. And somebody there has a visionary. They said, Wouldn't it be great if this hotel that's in the shape of a guitar could have guitar strings of light reaching into the heavens? This thing could be viewable from the local Miami airport. And so it would serve as a beacon. People would say, What the heck is that? And have to go there just to see it. And so we were involved in the early proposals of that and the prototype. And we drove down there 3 separate times, and we brought 3 separate prototypes of how to do that. And ultimately, they implemented it. They went with what they wound up doing was hiring a local engineer or a laser engineer that would actually live in the hotel to maintain the whole thing. I think that was going to be a very expensive way to go, but that's how they ultimately accomplished it. But the result is stunning. And you talk about customers coming to us with their ideas, and that was a customer come to us with an idea. Say, hey, we got this idea, laser strings going into the heavens. Can you do this? Yes or no? And we said, well, I don't know if we could do it or not. We build some prototypes and see. You had Stefan Tomke on last week who talked about the experiments in innovation, and that's ultimately what you've got to do. We don't know what this is going to look like. We don't know what it's going to look like in the clouds and that sort of thing. The only way to tell is to build something and see it. And
Well,
so, yeah. But since then, we have done 2 separate skyscrapers, one in Macau and one with Vietnam, using that same kind of technology. And there was another. We talk about wacky ideas that customers come to us. There was a customer a couple years ago came to us and they said, "Hey, we want to project lasers into space," and they didn't quite tell us why they wanted to do it, but they said it needs to be this kind of laser and project over this kind of angle, and it needs to do this. Can you do this? And it was mostly stuff that we were already doing, and there was only one thing we had to develop to satisfy their need, and it was this thing called a laser diode driver. But they said it has to be 100% reliable. It's going to go through the Van Allen radiation belt. We can't just drive a truck out there to repair it. It's got to be 100% reliable. And so we had to figure out then how to do that and what would the dangers be. And the primary for them, because of the handling and liftoff and everything, that the primary thing to deal with was ESD, electrostatic discharge. So we had to develop a component that would do this. And at first, I thought it was impossible to talk about the innovation. What we found out was that it had to take 35 amps in 1 nanosecond and discharge that and keep the laser diode safe, which sounds impossible. 35 amps in a nanosecond, and then but overnight, I thought about 6 different ways to do it, came into the office, immediately discharged 2 of the 6 ways, ordered some parts to put together. We tried the remaining 4 ways, wound up discharging the 2 ways, but found 2 ways that did work. And just through iterative refinement, to refine that one thing, we were finally able to ship it to the customer a complete system. And they said, if you can do the whole system, we'll buy it. We're talking about government money and space, right? So we're talking about a lot of money here. So we were able to deliver a number of systems to them that did this thing. But it occurred to us that, hey, this isn't just a one-shot deal. We could take the thing that we developed, the really secret sauce that made that trip possible, which is the ESD protector, and we can sell that as a separate component. And so we did. We formed a completely separate company called Lasorb, and we sell this Lasorb semiconductor product that can be used with laser diodes, and it protects them and makes them last practically forever. And so a lot of systems are using Lasorb now. A lot of entertainment systems that we ship use it, and the space systems and construction lasers and university things and all kinds of things use Lasorb.
Well, William, that's a perfect example of letting the curiosity take you to wherever it leads you, right? In this case, the problem, coming up with the solutions. I had, if you're a long time listener to the show, you know that I had Stephen Tomke on from Harvard, right?
Sure.
And his whole book is on experimentation, right? And
Right.
having that experimenting culture is absolutely so critical. Kudos to you for following the path where it might lead, and now a whole new part of your business. Not to mention the impact on having an increasing reliability. I don't know what orders of magnitude better than what it was before.
That's right. The laser diode manufacturers always said that these things can last 10,000 hours or more, but they never did. In reality, in products, they always failed, and nobody ever knew why. And it's primarily because of ESD and power surges that happen during power on and power off. And you can add this one little component to it and make them live up to the original expectation of the manufacturer. So it finally does what the manufacturer says it could do.
Wonders never cease, actually deliver what you promise, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so as customers come to us with a problem, a customer came to us and they said, hey, we know that the laser scanners that you use inside your laser projector for entertainment purposes can be, really super fast. We want to mount these things on a car. Can we do that? And we said, well, we don't know. Again, we just have to do an experiment. We don't have what in the automotive they call shock and vibe. We've never done shock and vibe studies, other than the fact that the roadie, drops it off the top of a truss and it lands on the cement floor and he jacks it right back up and it works. Other than that kind of shock and vibe, we don't know. We didn't do any official studies, but we said, well, here, we'll build one for you. You subject it to the temperature ranges you want. You subject it to the shock and vibe you want. And you tell us what broke, and then we'll fix it. Use a different adhesive or whatever we need to do to improve it. So as a result of those types of discussions and that sort of thing, we have a line of laser scanners now that are used on many of the self-driving cars that you see running around Pittsburgh and Phoenix and the Silicon Valley areas.
So when you say a laser scanner, it's actually like scanning the 3D view of what, so it's kind of like, is this a component that's going into the LiDAR systems then that are mounted on the vehicles?
Yes, absolutely. It is the motor. It is the thing. A laser scanner in our vernacular is a motor with a mirror on the top of the motor. Our motors don't spin round and round and round. They spin back and forth with very high precise position control. It's accurate to within 5 microradians, which is 5 millimeters from a distance of 1 kilometer. So it's just super accurate, super fast. And like I said, we originally developed these things for laser light shows, but we found applications in 3D printers and self-driving cars and all kinds of other things.
Wow, that is amazing. So, William, we're going to take another quick commercial break. When we come back, the question I'd like for you to think about during the break here is, what advice would you give to entrepreneurs who, if you had that advice back, 34 years ago when you started your business, what advice do you wish you'd had? And what advice would you give to entrepreneurs today? We'll be right back after this quick break. Welcome back to Killer Innovations. I'm your host, Phil McKinney. Continuing our conversation with William Benner. William, you've taken what started off as something for your band in high school and college, and now have turned it into a growing business that, in many cases, I'm gonna just go out and proclaim that most, if not all, of the listeners have seen something similar, or have actually seen your systems being used in the shows and experiences they've seen either live or on TV or on YouTube. So I'm guessing the listeners are sitting there going, "Man, I wish I had 10 minutes with William, because I've got 10 questions on how did he go from where he started to where he is today, and how does he keep curiosity alive after all these years?" So think back, what advice would you give the listener? And keep in mind, our listeners are innovators, entrepreneurs. What advice, given your experience, would you share?
Oh, sure. Well, it's a lesson that I learned relatively recently, actually, and it is this. So in the past, I'd always think about, the question I'd ask myself is, how do you do this? Okay, the customer needs us to do something. How are you going to do it, right? And you got to figure out how you're going to do it. That is a tough thing. And what I found, and what I've applied for our last three projects, which one's called Quick Show, it's a software project, and one was these laser scanners, and one was the semiconductor product I talked to you about called Lasorb. You know what really helped was not to ask the question how to do this, but imagine that it actually already exists. Imagine it's already done, and then describe what it looks like. Like when I had to figure out how am I going to discharge 35 amps in 1 nanosecond. Well, imagine that it is, if it is possible, how is it possible? Is it impossible? Might be impossible. Just describe what it looks like. Say, okay, it's possible. There is already a product that does it. Imagine it. Okay. And then just literally write down on a piece of paper what it looks like. If we think about the age where we went from a flip phone to an iPhone, right? So, okay, you don't have to figure out how does the iPhone work. Just imagine that. Okay, it's a piece of glass. You touch it. You could just start describing this thing, and then that winds up to be a kind of pathway, a map, a navigation tool to get to where you're going. So that's really the advice. It's not really business advice per se, but when it comes to the topic of innovation, is how to get there. And this is what I've done on, like I say, on the last three projects. And I wish I'd have known, because prior to that, it's always kind of a brute force approach of, how are you going to do this, and how is this going to happen, and it's just a lot of how questions. And it turns all of the how questions into, what does it look like? Describe it. Describe, and the more clarity you have on the description of what the end result is, the closer you can actually get a product. It's just like a roadmap. It just takes you right there.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's, I don't know what you would call it, backward casting, right? Where you visualize that solution and then back your way, into what's really going to be required to make that available. Now, we could make it sound like it was all rosy and easy, and your entire path got laid out back when you were in the band, right? But I'm going to guess, like everybody else, that you've had a couple of potholes along the way. So describe, where you've had some of those challenges and what you learned from those.
Oh gosh, there's so many. I mean, there's all. I'll tell you. I'm not sure how relevant this is going to be, but so in our laser scanners, we have to fill them with epoxy, and this is something I had never done before. And so, and I only had one idea for how to fill it with epoxy, and I tried that idea, and it didn't work. And I was thinking, as I was filling it with epoxy, I was thinking to myself, if this doesn't work, I'm out of ideas. And it didn't work. And I said, and as soon as it didn't work, I came up with another idea of how to solve the problem. So it's just, it's the whole failure mindset, right? It's not failure. It's not that my idea for filling the scanner failed. Sure, it failed, but it led to a solution that actually wound up a lot better than if the first thing had worked. It would have been a hard solution. I wound up finding a much easier thing later on. So just sure, the technical endeavors and the innovations lifestyle is full of quote unquote failures, but these are just things that lead you to other things that wind up being success. And it's not without pain either. I didn't go in there hoping, gosh, I sure hope that this thing fails and I don't fill the thing with epoxy. It's not the mindset. It's just knowing that if this happens, that's not the end of the game. It's just the kind of the beginning of a new pathway to solve the problem, beginning of a new game or something like that.
So, William, if people want to keep track of what you're up to, what is the best place for them to track you down at?
Sure. The easiest thing to remember is three words: Get a Laser, LASER, getalaser.com. That's a kind of a generic website that describes the sky lasers that we do and various other laser applications we're involved in. I think Lasorb is mentioned up there and laser scanners as well. So getalaser.com would be a great place to go.
Great. And we'll add that into the show notes. So if you're driving in your car, you don't have to try to remember to write that down or
Right.
capture it on a scrap receipt in the passenger seat. So wait, get home, go over to killerinnovations.com, and we'll have the links over there. William, thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to join us and sharing your story with the listeners here at Killer Innovations.
Sure, it's been great.
Great. As we wrap up today's show, just wanted to give you some heads up on some things going on. As if you're a regular listener, last week's show was on disruptive shock. It was an audio excerpt of a webinar. And it's actually a webinar series that we are running. So if you're interested, hop on over to disruptiveshock.com. It's talking about how do you innovate through disruptions, particularly shocking or surprising ones, such as COVID-19. It's an opportunity for you to hear about strategies that work, how to think about the future, how to apply that, how to think about innovating your own business and the products and services that you're offering today. It also has a great Q&A process as part of that webinar, so you get the opportunity to ask your questions and be part of the conversation. So again, disruptiveshock.com. Also, hop on over to Killer Innovations. We will have the show notes for today's show and also the entire archive going back now 15 years. And with that, we'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.